Hey everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game news. It is December 17th, 2021, and these are the top stories of the day. To kick things off, we've got something cool officially from Ubisoft Toronto. They are now hiring people, talented folks out there, to work with them under the Ubisoft Snowdrop engine to make a brand new Splinter Cell game. This is their attempt at rebooting the series by remaking the very first game using Snowdrop engine. This is pretty cool because Splinter Cell was a fun title, and it's been a pretty good series over the years that began in the Xbox, GameCube, PS2 era, and that's when Ubisoft was really turning out some hits like Splinter Cell and Prince of Persia, to name a couple, along with Beyond Good and Evil. It was a good time for the company. And then, of course, they went on with Assassin's Creed playing a big focus. They've always kind of dabbled in Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Saga. They had the Rabbids. They had Rayman games progressing forward. So now Ubisoft is what they are. They're a little bit different than they were in the early 2000s. But, hey, that's cool seeing a game from that era come back. We also know that they are remaking Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. So my hope is that 2022 and beyond for the company has a little bit of their old while keeping up with the new and finding a good way to give us a balance. So with that being said, I'm looking forward to Splinter Cell and hope that the remake of the original game is handled well, that it's a hit, and that it brings Sam Fisher back. And that we'll see a new entry in the series every few years moving forward. Next up, this is an image of Final Fantasy VI on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, way back in the 90s, early 90s. And this is a fantastic game. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasy games. It is my favorite of the 2D era prior to 7. It, in fact, is my favorite probably through 10, I would even say. 10 was that contention point where I'm like, okay. 7 was grand in that it brought a different cinematic feel and a very likable cast and a really cool, locale, unforgettable cinematic scenes. But 10 brought voice acting and a really mature take on the visual aesthetic of the world. Not to say that 8 and 9 didn't have a mature take as well. You could say that 8 was more of a mature story than 10, but 10's just felt bigger, and it was bigger in terms of just the grandness of the locales. And that's thanks to PlayStation 2's hardware power at the time, but the voice acting, the FMVs, it all brought that to another level of, do I like this more than 6 or not? Is it as impactful as 7? Well, it did the voice acting, but 7 maybe wins in impact over 10. But 10 maybe is a better game in my opinion. But, I guess I still held on to 6. And then, the series went different. We've had some online only games like with 11 and 14. 12, 13, still fine games. 15, good but very different. If I had to look back at the whole series, though, and still pick a favorite, I think it's this one. I think it might be Final Fantasy VI, still as my favorite, but definitely of that 2D era, And anyways, the reason why I'm showing you this image is because we just got a shot of Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster from the classic opera scene. This is what it's going to look like. Now, this looks kind of Octopath Traveler or Triangle Strategy engine-like with that 2D HD, and it's not quite because Square Enix has decided to not remake these games with that 2D HD engine, even though I would love to see 6 take that 2D HD engine, kind of like I would Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is another one that, along with Final Fantasy VI, it might be better and is truly one of the best RPGs of all time, in my opinion. Chrono Trigger, that is, along with FF6, both excellent games, still hold up to this day. So it's not quite that grand of a remake, but a pixel remaster. And we discussed this before on the channel. They're going over and tightening these old Famicom, NES, Final Fantasy games, the Super Nintendo 4, 5, and 6, Super Famicom, Final Fantasy games, and in some cases, it just looks like a little bit of a tightened up image. But in others, and this is the first one, in my opinion, that really shows off, okay, they're going over certain locations and giving it a significant bump up in the feel, the size, and the scope, elaborating on the scene. Pretty sweet. We'll see in time just how much attention to detail they're giving these extra locations in the game and how many of them are getting it, you know? Let me know what you think. I think it's pretty cool. Okay. Anyways, moving on. Nintendo just dropped last night 5 additional Sega Genesis games to the Nintendo Switch expansion pack. They are Altered Beast, Toe Jam and Earl, Dynamite Headdy, Sword of Vermilion, and Thunder Force 2. That's pretty cool because we just got one new Nintendo 64 game in Paper Mario but a week ago, and now 5 Sega Genesis games just dropped, boom, all at once. Of course, it would be nice to maybe get another Nintendo game or a Super Nintendo game. Gosh, how cool would it be, speaking of, Chrono Trigger, to get that one on here, or Super Mario RPG. That would be another massive win. But hey, added value just came to the expansion pack. If you looked at the expansion pack as, I'm only paying $20 a year for Nintendo Switch Online, the extra 30 basically is this. Am I going to get 30 games out of it that I could play all year long? That's $1 per game for 365 days of entertainment, plus your Animal Crossing, plus more games to come. Is that worth it? Yeah, I think so. I always relate it back to when I was younger and I rented games more frequently than purchasing them because I wasn't always operating with my own money. I rented a game for 2 days and it cost me $2 and that was it. So the value for me is renting 15 games for $30 and having access for 30 days. This is 30 games, which is twice that amount for the same cost for 12 times the amount of time. That's why expansion pack's worth it to me. But if you're not interested at all in N64 and Genesis games, then you stick with the basic plan of $20, and that's not bad. Or you team up and split the 35 8 ways or the 88 ways. But that's, a different topic altogether. We've discussed that many times on the channel. But for now, we got 5 new games, extra value, pretty cool. Let me know what you think. I remember playing Altered Beast a lot back in the day, and I even downloaded it several years ago on the Wii, and also, transferred it over to Wii U. So I have it fairly easily accessible, but cool to have it that one more time, Okay, next up, we've got our Famitsu Sales. This is going to be a big segment today because what we have to talk about is pretty significant as we have another record. Okay, first up, thank you to Chris1964 from the installbaseforum.com forums for putting Famitsu's charts neatly in this section. This occupies week 50 of 2021, which is that December 6th through December 12th time frame. Let's hop into it, okay? At number 1 is Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl with 130,000 units sold. At 2 is Mario Party Superstars with 53,800 copies sold. At 3 is Big Brain Academy Brain vs. Brain, moving 33,000 units. That's only a 10% drop, by the way, from the previous week, and I expect that this game has a higher digital ratio than normal due to the nature of the game being so pick up and play like. So I think this game is going to be a pretty good hit, maybe not to the degree sales wise as Ring Fit Adventure, but up there in terms of being a surprisingly solid evergreen title, good legs on this one. At 4 is Minecraft on Nintendo Switch with 26,000. At 5 is Animal Crossing on the same platform with 23,000. At 6 is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with 21,000 units moved. A lot of these games have increased, by the ways of the previous week, up 32%, up 43%, up 28%, up 35%. Very impressive. Let's continue. At 7 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, moving another 20,000 copies. The game is 3 years old. Props. That's up 38%. Momotaro Dentetsu is at number 8 with 14,000 copies sold. Had a massive 115% increase. We have not seen it in the top 10 in a while, and here it is, still doing very well, evidently. At 9 is Ring Fit Adventure, up 47% to 13,700 for the week. At 10 is Pokemon Sword and Shield with 12,800. It's great to see that the interest around Pokemon Diamond and Pearl is kind of helping people look at, well, Sword and Shield, maybe I missed out on that, and I kind of want to play it because Diamond and Pearl brought me back into Pokemon. Not bad, right? It's having that trickle effect. The Nintendo Switch is a fascinating platform. This kind of stuff happens regardless, but on Nintendo Switch, everything is just amplified, you know? At 11, we have the top 30. Maybe we'll go to 15 and then kind of glance over the last 15. At 11 is Super Mario World plus Bowser's Fury, that's 3D World, with 9,200 copies moved. Clubhouse Games 51 is at 12 with 7,082 copies sold. At 13 is Disney Magical World 2 with 6,900. At 14th place is Iga Sumiko Gurashi with 14,000 copies sold. Sorry, 6,364 copies sold. The 14,581 is lifetime for this game, as it just came out recently. And at 15th place is Minecraft Dungeons on Nintendo Switch, moving up 103% from the previous week to 5,683 copies. That's the top 15. If you scroll down, I'll tell you right now, it's another Nintendo Switch dominated chart. And I mean every single one of the games on the chart is top 30. Remember earlier this year, we got for the first time ever a top 30 chart where only one platform was on it. And that was the first time since 1989. 32-year-long record that Nintendo finally bested of itself during the Famicom era, basically their NES, right? Where one platform, Nintendo Switch in this case, took all 30 spots. Not all 10, but all 30. Just massive. That happened 2 more times now. This is the 3rd time this year where Nintendo Switch had such Nintendo domination where it obliterated the charts. We could go over quickly the remaining 15. Super Mario Maker 2, Fortnite, Taiko no Tatsujin, Splatoon 2, Fishing Spirits, different version of Splatoon 2 where it's not including the the Octo expansion. The first one that I mentioned included Octo expansion. They ultimately are one game. It's just the Octo expansion is that DLC bundled in with the game. We've got Game Builder Garage, WarioWare, Super Mario Odyssey, Shin Megami Tensei 5, which is cool to see it at physical only, 184,000 in Japan. New Pokemon Snap, props on it, getting to 302,000 physical only. Super Mario Party, oldie but goodie, at 3,800. And we have the Battle Cats, FIFA 22, and Miitopia, finishing out the last of the top 30. Good to see health on here. Interesting to see where certain games are that we don't get to check out all of the time, like Game Builder Garage. It's over 250,000, physical only. WarioWare is on the verge of 200,000. I mean, it's 26,000 away, but I think physically it will get to 200,000 within the next few months, most likely. Digitally, it's well over 174 now, you know. Calling it 250 or 300,000 is definitely not a reach. But that's it for the physical sales software charts. Let's go over to the hardware side of things. And on the hardware side of things is where I think things maybe get even more interesting. Like if you thought that the software was pretty cool, the hardware is kind of wild this week. 192,335 Nintendo Switch consoles sold this past week in Japan. It is down from last year's 229,000 for that same week, and you can see the divide between 2021 and 2022. Last year at this point, 5.4 million this year at this point, 5.2 million. So they are, well, they being its 2020 self, 211,000 units ahead. I don't think that Nintendo Switch this year is going to top its 2020 self anymore, but hey, it's getting very close. It's going to be somewhere like 4 to 10% off, and that's really not far off at all. Nintendo Switch is on the verge of 23 million. It will happen within the next 3 weeks for sure, possibly 2 if we have some big shipments, but 3 to be safe. And last week at 202,000, just a little bit down. Not bad really, you know, mind-blowing. But the crazier thing is, you're like, okay, so what's so crazy? Unless if you've already glanced down as I've been speaking. The second place spot, PlayStation 5, is 1,133. Remember last week, this divide was basically 200,000 to 2,000, and it was Nintendo Switch outselling PlayStation 5, the first place console outselling the second place console by 100 to 1, which was the greatest gap, the greatest divide, the greatest differential ever in the history of Japan between first and second place. This week just broke last week's record, and by a lot. 192 to 11, that's like a 170 split. Thought 100 was big. 170 is shattering. And I see this online, and some people say stock issues. Yeah, there's a stock issue going on for Nintendo. They internally estimated, originally hoping potentially to sell 30 million. They released that report that they were aiming to do 25.5 million. They had to cut forecasts from 25.5 to 24 worldwide. PlayStation 5 said that they're reducing their shipments by 1 million. Microsoft said they're not going to be able to ship out as many units as they once hoped. Everyone's got some kind of chip shortage going on. Nintendo probably would like to have more Nintendo Switch OLED models out there. The thing is, Nintendo is shipping a couple 100,000 a week to Japan, several 100,000 to the United States, a few 100,000 to Europe, tens of thousands to Australia and to South America and all of these other countries. Xbox is shipping these several 100,000s, low millions all over the world and giving Japan 1,000. PlayStation 5, Sony is giving all these hundreds of thousands, low millions all across the world, giving less than 1% of the total to Japan. You can't tell me that Sony can't, that Microsoft can't, boom, pump out and drop 100,000 PS5s and Xbox Series S/X's to Japan if they wanted to, and they would take away from their core market. And you can see where their core market is. They do care more about North America and Europe than they do Japan. With Xbox, it kind of has always been this thing because the systems have never really been fully adopted all that well by Japan. The original Xbox was the best selling, and then it went 360 and 1, but then now Series is starting to turn things around. I think Xbox Series, if they give it enough stock and allow Japan to buy more, they're poised to selling potentially 2 million, which would be a gigantic improvement over one, and would then be clear and above the original Xbox and become the best selling Xbox platform ever in Japan. But Sony is the one to take more criticism here because, you know, they had the 20 million selling PS1. They had the 25 million selling PS2. They dropped into that 13 million PS3 category and that 9 million PS4 category. They are in a decline. PS5, I was never expecting to be a 20 million selling platform again, nor did I even think it would hit 15, but, you know, falling in at about 8 to 11, that seemed like a fair estimate, but it looks like Sony is fully abandoning Japan, just jumping ship. They might come back later when they feel like now it's time to do like a second launch, like that first launch for a year was just to get out, just to get out 1.1 million, maybe by then 1.5, 1.6 million, kind of have a little bit of a fan base in Japan. Don't abandon them completely. Although honestly, this is almost abandonment completely, you know. And then, okay, well, we've got Final Fantasy VI to drop when we have, you know, the next Dragon Quest or some other big exclusive. That's when we'll start pumping out more. But will it be too little too late? When that happens, not to say that the market will go Xbox instead, because that also requires Microsoft to want to pump more also to take advantage of the situation. Now they can, honestly. Now, if they wanted to be second place in Japan, they actually have a chance. They could actually be sending out 10,000 to Japan every week, which isn't going to take all that much from the North American and European share. You're like, 10,000, isn't that a lot? Not when you're sending off several 100,000 to US, Europe, and stuff. Taking 10, that would be very appropriate for Japan. They would love it. They would buy it. They would buy 6 of that 10 on any given week, and probably even more, especially during the holiday times. But you're giving 1,000? That's almost nothing. That's not even a dent in the overall stock that these companies are giving out. They're choosing to not. But Nintendo, on the other hand, as they're gaining more and more steam, as the generation goes longer and longer, and more people are liking Nintendo Switch, more third-party Japanese developers that don't really have an option of, well, we can't just put our game only on PS4. That user base is older, and it's not as healthy anymore. They're not buying up the games by the hundreds of thousands anymore. PS5, almost non-existent. We can't just shift focus and put our smaller, not AAA budget, but still potentially AAA quality, two different things there, titles on PS5. Well, we're going to put it on Nintendo Switch, and it's going to stretch out the Nintendo Switch generation longer and give Nintendo a longer amount of time to release a Nintendo Switch Plus, and then a Nintendo Switch 2, or just a Nintendo Switch 2. And when that happens, you're going to have a more powerful system, and at that point, even some of the big developers are like, okay, maybe it wasn't our intention of putting Final Fantasy 16 on the base Nintendo Switch, but now Nintendo has a console that's comparable in power, hypothetically, in Nintendo Switch 2 as the Xbox Series S, you know, more or less, right? Let's call this a March 2024 machine. Those other two systems are going to last longer anyways, PS5 and Xbox Series X. I don't think they're going to have a replacement anytime before November of 2028. They'll probably even have a mid-gen refresh, potentially making that generation last 9 years, but 8 is what I think it's going to be, at least. So Nintendo might be the recipient of the next big Dragon Quest. They might be the recipient of some titles that Bandai Namco has in development from the Dragon Ball series or another Soul Calibur game. Now, probably Sony's not, sweating bullets here because they know that the bigger Japanese developers with their bigger games, fine, might not be selling in Japan. That's okay. The next Tekken, the next Street Fighter, the next Soul Calibur, the next Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest and Tales of game, they're all going to do very well on PlayStation 5 in the West, in Europe, in Australia, which is still technically East, as it's closer to Japan than it is, Europe, for instance, or California, right? Or the majority of the United States. But abandoning the Japanese audience seems kind of lousy because there are a lot of fans in Japan of the PlayStation family of systems. What if that was your favorite controller? Well, honestly, all three controllers are great. They're just different types of good between the DualSense and the Nintendo Switch Pro controller and the Xbox Series X controller. So you could evolve as a gamer. You could just switch over your hands and get used to this analog stick setup. What about your achievements or your trophies, in this case on PlayStation? What if you were with Sony throughout the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 era and you kind of wanted to see that continue? And yeah, I guess you could just hop on an Xbox and, play these Japanese-centric third-person grand RPGs and other adventure-like games that smaller Japanese developers develop on your Xbox, if Microsoft pumps them out, or Nintendo Switch has just become that much stronger that at this point, a couple of years in, people might not even care about like, oh, I've been clamoring, I've been just waiting so badly for that PS5. Now it comes out. Nah, part of it could be a principle thing. Part of it could be a respect thing. Nintendo never left. Now, you don't want to look at it like this so much of, oh, I'm so loyal to a brand that I'm going to purposely suffer just out of principle because this company abandoned me and I want to play that game but on the better system or on the better graphics. Not to say one system's better than the other. Some people will look at it that way though. But if people from a principle level, from a respect level, look at it and say, all right, Nintendo never left, Sony left, Sony's back now. I can play this game on Nintendo's system on the go or on TV, giving me 2 layers of depth, and play it at this level quality. I could play it on PlayStation 5, which they did leave, which it is more expensive, but they're coming back now, and I could play it on the system with the better graphics. What are you gonna do? There's a lot to think of. A lot of people operate in a very different way. People operate this with sports. Some people can't stand a sports team because they left their state, they left their city, and then they came back and they move on. Some people could overlook that and said, different team, different management, different players, don't be salty. But people are complex. But I know a lot of people from that psychological perspective are not going to be too keen that even when Sony does come back, it might be too little too late. Unless, and there is a way that you could buy someone's interest back, you could buy their fandom back, and that is, all right, this game comes out on Nintendo and it's here in terms of quality and goodness and stuff, but that PS5 version is just like so far above and beyond either the base Switch or even the Nintendo Switch Plus, Nintendo Switch 2, that people are like, well, the greed in me that wants that better experience is going to say, fine, whatever, it's okay that you left. I don't want to suffer with getting anything less than this because that differential is too great. We don't see that all often between Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, but that gap is going to start to become more apparent between Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, especially as the developers start making games kind of exclusively for those two over Switch. But by then I fully expect we'll have a Nintendo Switch Plus or a 2 within the next few years, possibly both. It's very intriguing. I always dive deep into software and hardware analytics because to me it's so much more than just numbers. It's also the mindset of the fans. It's even if you had 300,000, let's say Sony and Microsoft did something crazy, and Nintendo wasn't stock limited, shipped 300,000 units of Nintendo Switch with OLED model, taking up a big chunk of like 200,000 and, 80,000 base Switches, 20,000 Nintendo Switch Lites. PlayStation 5, they had 200,000 regulars, 100,000 digitals. Xbox Series, they had 150,000 of each, X and S, and bam, that was the shipment for the next 3 weeks in Japan. All 3 manufacturers were going to give 900,000. Then let them duke it out. Would Nintendo Switch sell 100% of those 900,000? Or how far off? Even if given the opportunity, right now, would 900,000 people buy those PS5s? Would 900,000 people buy those Xbox Series X and S's? Or would it be a percentage of it? Because even though some people say it's only this great of a divide because of stock, that is Sony's fault. They're not sending the stock to Japan. But if they did, would it still match this? And I don't think it would, because I don't think that for the Japanese market there are enough compelling exclusive reasons to own a PS5 yet that really fit that mind frame of what the Japanese audience likes. A lot of the games internally being made at Sony moving forward are more Western focused. That is their drive. You can see it with the development of the games, and you can see it with where they're putting their systems. Now, I'm not saying that you can see it where they're developing the games is a bad thing, because I like my God of War. I like my Uncharted. The Last of Us, Horizon, Ratchet and Clank. These are the games that I do like, and even Ghost of Tsushima, they're more Western-focused games, with the last one literally taking place in Japan, Returnal as well, not taking place in Japan, but more Western-focused. That I'm going to enjoy them. That's cool. The Japanese gamers they could just hop into them, but since history has shown that they're a little bit not as interested, seeing fewer and fewer games made for that audience makes you wonder, what's the next 5-10 years going to be like in Japan? Will it just be only Nintendo is sold in there, and Microsoft and Sony really switch gears to like, okay, we're not even going to release a system there anymore? I don't think that's going to ever happen, but like, could it? Because 1,000 a week, you might as well not even be there almost, because it's not even making a dent in this 192,000. I had a fun post on Twitter, and this wasn't any biased talk really. I just said, if you thought it was wild when Nintendo Switch outsold PlayStation 5 in Japan 106-1 this past week. This past week was even crazier, 170-1, and I just put it there. And then, I elaborated a bit, saying Nintendo Switch lifetime sales in Japan are at 22.5 million with 23 incoming. This wasn't biased, this wasn't speculation, this is just fact, and it's pretty neat. There were actually a lot of people, 1,215 people that liked it, got retweeted a lot, had a lot of positive engagements, and this was put up yesterday morning, so it's just a little over 24 hours now, and it's doing pretty well for itself. So nice to see that conversation going. All right, that was fun talking with all of you. Hope you have a good one. Enjoy your video gaming this weekend, and go see Spider-Man. Unrelated, but I'm probably going to put up a review, non-spoiler, and a spoiler review later today, because I saw it yesterday, No Way Home, and it was absolutely fantastic. Like, I loved it so much. So I'll probably be talking about that later today. All right. I recommend you check it out. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.